welcome to the program. Canada is a long-standing partner and ally of Ukraine since the start of Russia's undeclared war in Donbass. The Canadian government has pledged more than $700 million in additional help for security. As of July the 1st, the Canadian Armed Forces Joint Task Force has trained 7,860 Ukrainian soldiers. Yet the provision of lethal weapons in the form of military-to-military donations has not been announced, despite repeated calls from Kiev. Joining us to discuss Canadian support for Ukraine is James Bezan. He's a Conservative Member of Parliament. He joins us from Ottawa now. Welcome, Mr. Bezan.
Thanks for having me back on the show, Tamara.
So what has changed since the standing committee's call to arm Ukraine failed to garner approval from the government?
Well, so the Standing Committee on National Defence, of course, had made that request. There's one request that was in that report that we put out last fall that the government did act on, which was to add Ukraine to the automatic firearms country control list so that we can ship lethal weapons and Canadian companies can sell lethal weapons to Ukraine. But in the absence of any real donations of firearms from the Canadian government to the Ukrainian armed forces, Andrew Scheer, the leader of the official opposition, he and I put out a statement saying that there's current weapons that were to be given to the Kurdish Peshmerga, and because of the fallout following the vote of independence and separation in the Kurdish region of Iraq, those weapons have been sitting in storage since last fall, collecting dust. Some of those weapons are sitting in Jordan, and most of them are sitting in Montreal. And these include sniper rifles, machine guns, Gustav anti-tank missiles, mortar systems, and defensive radar capabilities. Those firearms would be well used and welcomed by Ukraine and would help balance off the war that they have with the Russian proxies in Donbass. So we would like to see those weapons donated, but in the absence of the Trudeau government moving on that here in Canada, an Andrew Scheer Conservative government will make that happen hopefully next year.
Right. Now, what is Canada's overall strategy on sending lethal aid?
Well, the Conservative Party has been saying that this lethal aid should be coming. The door has been opened, and I'll give Chrystia Freeland credit for this, that she did open the door by allowing Ukraine to be added onto Canada's automatic firearms country control list, allowing Canadian companies to deal directly with the Ukrainian military. And there's one contract that's already been signed for sniper rifles. We're just waiting for the Government of Canada to sign the export permits so those rifles can be shipped to Ukraine and would greatly enhance the capability of the Ukrainian forces in deterring any more aggression from the Russian soldiers and the Russian proxies that are taking the fight to Ukraine in Donbass.
So what you're saying is a Canadian arms or weapons manufacturer has made or is in the process of making a deal?
Yes, with the Ukrainian military. So that one is moving forward, and that's because the Government of Canada opened the door by adding Ukraine to our list for selling lethal weapons to them directly on a commercial basis. Of course, the government does hold a bit of a veto that they can, deny the export under permit. But once the deal is done, plus Ukraine is on the list, it should be an automatic process for Chrystia Freeland as the Minister of Foreign Affairs to sign that export permit so that these sniper rifles in this situation can move forward. And I know that there's other equipment manufacturers here that make, machine guns, they make light armored vehicles. They are all looking at the potential of working with Ukrainian companies and the Ukrainian military to better equip Ukrainian soldiers. And by better equipping them, that in itself not only allows them to defend Ukraine's sovereignty, but it will deter Vladimir Putin from sending more soldiers into harm's way.
And how long would a deal like that, how fast would these weapons, in this case sniper rifles, would they arrive to Ukraine and be sent to the armed forces?
If the export permit is signed, I think as fast as they can build them, they'll be sent to Ukraine. So I don't see that being a major hiccup. The the suppliers here are well established and trusted, and are very reliable in honoring their contract agreements. So it's just a matter of Christopher Freeland signing the export permit on behalf of the Government of Canada, and those firearms should be able to land in the hands of the Ukrainian military so they can be trained on them and put into action.
Now, Ukraine is in 11th place among the world's largest arms exporters between 2013 and 2017. That's according to CIPRI. And it's actually above Canada, which is 16th. However, Ukraine is not even close to being among the top importers of military equipment. Now, how is this being received in Ottawa?
Well, we know that Ukraine does very well in building things like tanks, and does very well in building other military equipment like Kalashnikov rifles that are used by almost all militaries in Eastern Europe and across the Middle East. But the reality is that if you want to look at using higher tech weapons, if you want to look at using some of the best sniper rifles in the world, they're built right here in Canada. There's a reason why Canada has a reputation of being, the Canadian Armed Forces have the best snipers in the world. And a lot of it is not just the training and the skills and the capabilities of our troops. It also comes down to the firearms that they use. And so if you want to look at high quality, high tech firearms and other lethal military equipment, Canada does it very well. And so I think that's one of the things that Ukraine is looking at, and that's why they've been to Canada, that's why they've been to the US and to Britain and other countries looking at what is available and what would help them make them a more powerful military in dealing with Russian aggression in Donbass.
Right, and I believe there are several sniper training programs here in Ukraine currently as part of the Open Unifier mission. The Canadian trainers here in Ukraine, and part of their work, they help train the Ukrainian snipers. Now, you've just mentioned that Canada has the best snipers in the world, potentially. And if Ukraine does receive Canadian sniper rifles, Ukrainian soldiers have the potential of greatly improving their kind of sniper school. Is that correct?
I think that's exactly right. And as many of us have always said, Putin is provoked by weakness, and the only way that you're going to be able to back the Russian Federation off of Ukrainian territory is by a show of strength, and by providing lethal weapons, by providing the training that we're doing through Operation Unifier, along with our partners in the United States and the United Kingdom. We are able to really increase the capabilities of the Ukrainian military. This is an opportunity for Ukraine to, again, push back where Russia continues to push in. And everything that we can do here to support our friends and family and partners in Ukraine to balance off that aggression is ultimately in the best interests of the citizens of Ukraine. And that's why the Conservative Party of Canada is encouraging Christopher Freeland and the Government of Canada to do more, not to do less.
Right. And what would you say would be the message that Canada would be sending to Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin with potentially sending lethal weapons, and with Canadian manufacturers establishing deals with the Ukrainian defense industry?
Well, I know that the Russian Federation will not be happy about this deal, but at the same time, it's not about our relationship between Russia and Canada. This is about supporting our friends and family and our ally, Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin has to get the message that the West will not allow them to continue to bully their way through Eastern Europe. What we're seeing in Ukraine has to stop, and the only way that I see us getting to a peaceful resolution is by making Ukraine stronger. Stronger from a military perspective, stronger from an economic perspective, and also in improving democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and the overall judicial process in Ukraine are paramount to getting all those steps correct. And as we move forward, I know that the people of Ukraine are committed to that, and it is my hope that that in itself will be enough to deter Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation from doing more in Ukraine, and ultimately we'll be able to get to some sort of normal life again in Donbass.
Right. Now, I've been speaking to a few of the Canadian military commanders here working in Ukraine, and something that's been mentioned to me is that the future of Canada-Ukraine military cooperation should be the training of Ukrainian troops in Canada and vice versa. So, how realistic do you think this is?
I think it's very realistic. I think there's two streams there that we want to look at from bringing Ukrainian troops to Canada. One is, again, the development of officers, but also the non-commissioned officers, the higher-ranking enlisted men and women in uniform. So, developing that middle management skills, which isn't common in former Soviet militaries. And so if you look at Canada, the United States, the Brits, and most of NATO allies, we all work with very robust non-commissioned officer rank and corps. And that corps is really what is the management team on the ground that runs the armies, the navies, and our air forces. And so when you can get to developing, master warrant officers and sergeant majors and master corporals, those are the individuals that really are the best people for carrying through different commands coming out of the executive side of the military, from the generals and colonels and on down. And they're the ones that oversee the training and readiness side. So if we can develop that within Ukraine, I think that's very worthwhile. The other stream, of course, is what can Canadian soldiers learn from Ukraine. And the Ukrainian military, unfortunately, has the most experience in fighting modern-day warfare with Russia, the #1 adversary to NATO allies. And so there's a huge opportunity for us to learn on how we deal with hybrid warfare, how we look at how Russia's carrying out cyber attacks in Ukraine, not just against civilian infrastructure and financial institutions, public transit and ports, but also how they deal with the hybrid warfare, which includes cyber attacks in the theater of military operations. So that is, again, a great learning opportunity for Canada, and it'll be, of course, Ukraine that unfortunately has experienced it, but will be able to share their knowledge and their ability to combat cyber warfare.
Right, and I think that's one of the main things that when speaking to U.S. military or Canadian military or any NATO military that's working together with Ukrainian armed forces here in Ukraine, they all say that the plus side is that their military is learning a lot from the Ukrainian armed forces, who are coming back from Donbass and are going to the peacekeeping center and are also passing down their knowledge.
Yeah, and I hear the same thing from our men and women who have served in Operation New Fire, who've been there working alongside Ukrainian troops, and and they fully appreciate and understand that everyone that they're working with has been to the front. These are battle-hardened troops, and that they can share information back and forth, definitely bringing them up, Ukrainian military up to NATO standards, but it also provides that one-on-one capability and opportunity for our soldiers to learn from Ukrainian soldiers. So that exchange of information, that exchange of ideas, and more importantly, they all are now friends and brothers and sisters in arms. That type of exchange of friendship and ideas will last a lifetime.
Yeah, that bond is certainly something that I've heard about when working in at the peacekeeping center and speaking to some of the Canadian men and women there. So sounds like there's a lot to improve, but a lot has been done for Ukraine. Mr. Bezan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Anytime, it's always a pleasure.
We've been joined by James Bezan. He's a Conservative Member of Parliament, and we spoke about Canada's support for Ukraine. You're watching UATV.